Hi there, it's Aluna Michaels, Esoteric Astrologer, coming at you to talk about the events of November 2025. Sorry about that, I had a little accident there when I started. Okay, so first of all, thank you to the guys at Know Thyself Podcast, as always. And okay, so let's get started. So much going on. So the planet Mercury is going retrograde, which isn't the worst thing that ever happened to anybody. But what's going on is that it's retrograding in the sign of Sagittarius, and Mars just went into Sagittarius, and then the planet Uranus is in Gemini, opposite Mars and Mercury. And then Uranus is going to go backwards into Taurus as Mercury goes back into Taurus. So there's all this energy also with Uranus and Mars. And then we're having a full moon too in Gemini, opposite Sagittarius Sun, obviously in a full moon, but including the Mars kind of getting up there. So it's a lot of energy because Mercury is how our mind is busy or active, and Mars is the planet of action. So when you have Mars with Mercury, it's like, go, 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 go. Also, it can be people that are irritable or angry or impatient. It can also make you feel nervous. And then with the planet Uranus opposite both Mercury and Mars, Uranus, when it's in that kind of angle, can be a bit chaotic. So it revs up the energy, but it's a little like all over the place. Yeah, so the beginning of November, all these things are kind of happening. And then the moon is in Gemini. I'm doing this on the 5th. The moon just went into Gemini for 2.5 days. So that kind of is our emotions, and it kind of riles up more stuff. It's a lot at once. So I think the best thing when we talk about Gemini and Sagittarius as signs that are opposite each other, Gemini represents the lungs. It's kind of interesting how Aries is the head and Pisces is the feet, so all the signs kind of go through the body. And Gemini is the arms and fingers actually too, but also the lungs and breathing. And so taking some deep breaths is kind of good with Mercury in all this kind of chaotic kerfuffle sort of energy, and we're dealing with the signs of Gemini and its opposite Sagittarius. So just breathing or thinking things through, and because there's a feeling of like, this is the thing, or just do something, don't just not do anything. And it propels you into some wasted energy, or like just kind of spinning your wheels a little bit, or doing extra stuff you didn't even need to do. So there's something about going against the grain and just breathing, thinking things out, thinking things through, waiting, because other people will be like, no, I need the answer, or do the thing, or let's just go. And so that can be hard to go against the grain like that, or against what your own grain is saying. And I want to give you, because Mercury first was just going along, and then it opposed Uranus, the dates, like basically it was probably Halloween and then November 1st. And then, Mercury will go backwards. It stops and goes backwards and opposes Uranus on the way back. And that is the 20th of November. That's when it's back in Scorpio at that point. Yes. And then when Mercury goes direct and then passes by Uranus again in the opposition, that will be in December 7 or so. So we have it 3 times with this kind of frantic business. But this one that's going on now is like the most frantic because the Mars is involved. When we have, but there is something, I'm not going to that next thought. Mercury retrograde is a great time to get things done that you haven't gotten done, deal with stuff, like go back and sort things out. And not that you shouldn't start new things, but it's a great time to go back and say, oh, I had this here, I didn't see the value. Or if I complete this, I'll feel better. I didn't realize that was draining my energy, or something like that. But the sense of this eagerness, just making sure it's not a misplaced eagerness, I guess, with the Uranus involved, What's kind of interesting about when Mercury opposes Uranus on the 20th of November, and this is, again, a little confusing, but so let's say that Mercury will be in Scorpio, which is a water sign. The planet Jupiter is in Cancer, a water sign, and then Saturn is in Pisces. Remember, it snuck back into Pisces for a little bit more. It's also water signs. You get the three water signs, and they're all connecting in an interesting way. Not only are they forming that grand trine when you get all the water signs there, but because Mercury's going super slow because it's in retrograde, it kind of holds that connection. And sorry, I need some water. Jupiter is turning retrograde. So it's kind of holding its own self in the space in that trine with Mercury. And then Saturn is slowing down to go direct. So it's also kind of still. So not only are we in this really cool trine, but it's like kind of, not a bad way frozen, but it's holding that good moment for longer than it would be otherwise. And I've mentioned before that the outer planets, and let's just call, it's mostly Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto when you say outer planets, but with Jupiter and Saturn, they're getting toward like the end of the personal planets, toward the outer planets. But all those planets retrograde once and go direct once. So for half the year, let's say they're retrograde. So it's not a big deal that they're turning retrograde, but or going direct. But it's the way it's holding that moment because they slow down to change direction. So it holds that geometry really in a cool way. So when we say, okay, Uranus having gone back into Taurus because it's retrograding and opposing that Mercury is offset with the trine from Jupiter and Saturn. Probably lost you. Oh my God, shouldn't have told you all that. You're like, what? Okay, but but it means that Mercury, instead of just feeling riled up, has somewhere to go that makes sense because Jupiter is a principle of expansion and new possibilities. Saturn is more like contraction or simplification. So it's a balance between all this stuff and then what really could be the most viable option. So, and then there's Uranus that's sort of, again, softened. So instead of chaotic, it kind of adds to a sense of enthusiasm and stuff. So it's kind of interesting about if you're doing meditation at that time or even traveling can be really interesting. It can help you like break out of mental ruts and not just in like a random way, like kind of when it's just Mercury oppose Uranus, but in a way that's thought out or lives up to your principles and values or what you're striving toward. So that's all really good throughout November. And people talk about having a gratitude practice and think about Thanksgiving, but that can be really wonderful because Mercury is your thinking and your nervous system, and Jupiter can be is the principle of gratitude and expansion, but it's forging new pathways in your brain, in the way you feel about yourself, in your communication skills, in your day-to-day doings. And then Saturn helps it to log in. Because sometimes Jupiter is seen as like, yeah, Jupiter's awesome, but sometimes it's sort of fly by night. So the Saturn helps the cool thing to have roots. So the fact that if you're wanting to, again, break out of ruts or start something new, and doing that through a sense of gratitude or praising yourself rather than like, why aren't you doing it? Or hardline rules and stuff. So this is kind of a cool month for that. So like I said, just kind of the bumpiest part is we've already kind of gone through it. If you're, this past few days of November was extra bumpy. So the idea that Jupiter itself retrogrades in the sign of Cancer, it's kind of nice for the holidays because Cancer represents the family or nostalgia for the past and things like that. And it also can be about eating, food, self-care, and being able to be in some sort of like a ritual, like a routine or like a sacred ritual, I kind of think of with the Jupiter retrograding in Cancer, that you can appreciate your family or appreciate your upbringing or your roots. It's a nice time to be with family and maybe a little less whatever, a little less whatever than it might normally be. But also how you treat yourself and have those commitments to yourself or create new commitments. So that can be really nice. So you're not just like kind of going crazy through the holidays and doing stuff that isn't, great for you and then saying, oh, January 1st, I'm going to be good. It's like kind of honoring yourself, and honoring like your own past. Like, it's never that great when I eat pie, pumpkin pie every day until January 1st. It's never great. So why don't I say, hey, let me be kinder to myself or something like that. So that can be really good with the Jupiter turning retrograde. With Saturn going direct as it does, and Jupiter goes retrograde, by the way, like the 9th or 10th of November. Saturn's going direct around the 27th of the month, probably on Thanksgiving. And Saturn going direct, what's kind of exciting here, we already had Saturn move into Aries earlier this year. I think it was May. Yep, it was in May around Memorial Day. And then it went back into Pisces because it retrograded, and that was in the middle of August. No, that was at Labor Day, beginning of September. So it's going to go forward at the end of November, go back into Aries on Valentine's Day, all these holidays, it's Thanksgiving, Memorial Day. And it's not just leaving Pisces, but it's the whole zodiac cycle. So Saturn has like a 30-year orbit, and it's like refreshing its whole orbit. And it's always fun when all the planets go into a new sign. It's a new outlook on things, whatever. But the fact that it's a whole new zodiac, so Aries gets some kind of extra exciting. So the idea that we're wrapping up kind of a 30-year cycle of what Saturn can represent, like what your goals are, what standards you hold yourself to, are they still relevant? Pisces, again, about being compassionate towards yourself, somewhat repeating that theme of the Jupiter retrograding in Cancer. And it can be letting go of addictions, and that can be physical addictions to substances or patterns in relationships, negative thought patterns, and to have this kind of like a Zen sort of mind about new goals that you have, or just being able to kind of reset yourself and your expectations as Saturn goes into Aries. So there's kind of that wrap up for everybody of Saturn really finishing being in Pisces, really finishing that whole travel around the zodiac cycle for Saturn. And so that's kind of cool, and it's kind of nice that's happening at the new year too, kind of really starting fresh. Like New Year tends to, people think that way, but it's nice that Saturn can make that even more possible. It's going to be in the middle of February, but still, it's kind of getting to this idea that I'm ready to kind of make those changes and let myself off the hook and get on a new path. So, okay, so that is my message for November, and I hope I didn't drag you into too much astrology weeds with the Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury trine idea. But it seems like it's kind of a cool time once we get over this kind of overexcited energy the first few days of November. Okay, so if you want to get a session from me, please contact me at alunamichaels.com or 248-583-1663. My phone number is in the bottom of the YouTube. I don't see YouTube comments a lot. I do have gift certificates for holidays. You can get in touch with me about that. And some people ask if they can get gift certificates for themselves because they're at a discount for the holidays. Yes, you can do that. Okay, so have a great November, and bye-bye for now.